I have some good news and some really good news. The good news is that Title Update 14 has brought with it some improvements to the gameplay, and I have just released my new slider set. So we are back in business here in the Everton Takeover rebuild. And the really good news is that we managed to somehow backdoor our way into European football. Manchester City not only finished in a Champions League place, but also won the Europa League. So that means 6th place became a European spot as well. And that's exactly where we finished last season. Once again, I have input all the relevant information from our season here in the post-season tab in Buzzko's CoreDNA mod. Unfortunately, despite finishing in 6th position, we do only get 1 additional DNA and 1 additional trait point. I thought we might get a couple more since we did make the Europa League, but I've chosen to invest my 1 DNA point in the employment strand, which again, like last season, gives us another staff member that we can employ. And I've chosen to employ a chief analyst, which means we get a bonus to sign players that are undervalued at their clubs. And I've also chosen to invest our additional trait point in the Know Your Worth trait. Since we are in the Europa League this season, we're going to need to add a couple more first team quality players to the squad. So everybody's going to have to know their role. Everybody's going to have to understand that we're going to need to rotate the squad this season. Buzzko's CoreDNA mod has also calculated a new starting transfer budget for us this season. So we're going to be starting out with a massive 77 million. We did, of course, negotiate a transfer for Amadou Onana, who has now joined Arsenal. Victor Castro also anticipated that he wouldn't be getting very much first team football this season, so he requested to leave. He's joined Sheffield United. So those outgoings, in addition to all of the prize money that we got for finishing so high in the Premier League, would have gone a significant way to paying off that 40 million net spend that we outlaid last summer when we brought in Matheus Cunha, and we can spend the bulk of that 77 million this season. And the first place that money needs to go is on a replacement for Amadou Onana, and Graham Potter already has one in mind. Anton Stack is a player he's been eyeing up and lining up as a potential replacement for Amadou Onana ever since he joined the club, really. And Buzzko's realistic selling calculators determined that we need to pay somewhere in the region of 22.5 million to get the deal over the line. And Hoffenheim weren't too far off in their valuation either. We managed to agree on a deal worth 23 million for Stack. And Anton Stack wanted a crucial squad role. I wasn't quite willing to give him that at first, but Amadou Onana was a crucial player. He's one out, so Anton Stack can certainly be one in. We do agree on a contract in the end for £50,000 per week for the centre midfielder. So Anton Stack becomes the first signing ahead of Season 3 for Graham Potter here. Is going to go straight into that midfield alongside the likes of Lewis Ferguson and James Garner. He's going to be a really strong, powerful, robust defensive midfielder, very much in the Amadou Onana role, and he's certainly going to play a crucial part for us this season. So Stack slots nicely into a starting 11 that really is starting to look fairly strong. However, it's the depth in the squad that is severely lacking. João Virginia left the club on a free transfer, so that means we have no backup goalkeeper. We have James Tarkowski and Ben Godfrey, as well as Noah Mbamba at centre-back, so we've got plenty of depth there. However, James Justin remains our only backup fullback. Josh De Silva and James Garner could certainly use a bit of extra help in centre midfield, and Luca Waldschmidt is now our only backup striker slash centre forward, so we could certainly add a player there as well. And that's just if we manage to hang on to the players that we currently have in the squad. We have received an offer for Jared Branthwaite already. It was just from Fiorentina, so we were able to reject that one, but we might need to replace a first team player or two if we are forced to sell them this summer. You can never have too much experience in midfield though, and that's why Graham Potter's not only added Anton Stack to that area of the field, but also Scott McTominay. He's arrived from Manchester United for a fee of £15 million, signing on a 2-year deal. And those two additions aren't the only moves that Graham Potter has had up his sleeve for some time. He's gone back out into the transfer market and has brought in another experienced player, a former Everton player and fan favourite, Gerard Deulofeu. So he's going to arrive and play behind Matheus Cunha, likely ahead of Luca Waldschmidt, but it's going to be good to see a fan favourite back out on the pitch at Goodison Park once more. So with those new additions, we have a little less than 19.5 million left to spend. However, that transfer budget could be about to be bolstered because we have received another offer for Jared Branthwaite, this time for about 37 million. And this time from Chelsea. Buzzko's realistic selling calculator has determined, despite the fact that Chelsea finished in 7th place in the Premier League last season, below us, and won't be playing European football this season, that we must accept this offer based primarily, I would assume, on the fact that they are a bigger club. However, we can negotiate with Chelsea and bargain them up to a fee in the region of 49 million for Branthwaite. I don't particularly want to sell Branthwaite, and we really could use him if we're going to be playing European football this season. However, if we can negotiate Chelsea up to a fee in the region of 45 million or so, I think that money we could reinvest in multiple areas within the squad, and we could likely bring in 2 or 3 first team players to replace firstly Branthwaite and then to bolster the squad in other areas. And Mauricio Pochettino does eventually agree. It's a 45 million fee for Jared Branthwaite. And one thing I forgot to consider was that Bertrand Traore plays 20 or more games for us last season, so we're going to have to honour that buy option with Villarreal and bring him in permanently. So that money from Branthwaite is going to be even more important now, as we've had to dedicate 5 million of that towards Bertrand Traore, who does arrive from Villarreal. But Jared Branthwaite does negotiate on terms with Chelsea, so he is going to be on his way out from Goodison Park. So we finally made European football here in the realistic takeover rebuild with Everton. But just as we've done so, our 2 best, brightest young players have left the club. So the squad is shaping up nicely, but we do have something of a gaping hole at centre-back alongside Anderson and Ahmed Hodzic. I don't really want to play Tarkowski in that role because he's very much that central defender in the Anderson mould. Neither player really pacey enough to play in one of those wider centre-back positions. So we're going to be putting Godfrey in there for now. But we do have almost 60 million to spend once more with the departure of Jared Branthwaite. We have 3 positions in the squad left to fill. Goalkeeper, we're obviously just going to bring a backup to Jordan Pickford. Could be a young understudy, could be a more experienced backup, but certainly not a first team player. We then need a right back and a centre back, and we can go any direction with those positions really. You can suggest first team players that will play ahead of Nathan Patterson, or you can just suggest backups and allow Nathan Patterson to hold on to his first team role. And the same goes at centre back. We need a starter at the position, but do we bring in an experienced starter who's going to be incredibly useful in those European nights, or do we go with a younger prospect looking more towards the future and potentially risk not so much impact on the first team this season? Either way, drop some names in the comments below and I will be sure to get them scouted, shortlisted, and potentially put in an offer for them. And Graham Potter does need a goalkeeper on his bench ahead of the opening game of the season, so he has secured a deal for a backup to Jordan Pickford, and it's going to be Bailey Peacock Farrell, arriving on a 2-year deal from Burnley. Just 2 million paid for the 28-year-old, who will be a perfectly fine backup to Jordan Pickford this season. And with that, we are ready to begin season 3 here, kicking off our Premier League campaign at home against Brentford. That will be our featured game that we'll play in full, but we'll also be getting to highlights of a trip to the Amex to play Brighton, as well as our game against Aston Villa at Goodison Park. There's a lot riding on this season because although the board have decided that Potter only needs to finish mid-table domestically this year, they do want him to reach the quarter-final of the FA Cup rather than just the round of 16, and they would like to see a place in the Europa League semi-final here in our first season in Europe. So it's absolutely imperative that we get this Premier League campaign off to the right start, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for our new arrivals to make their mark this season. But Anton Stack is the only new arrival who finds a place in the starting 11 for the opening game of the season. Jordan Pickford, the captain, starts in goal. It's a back 5 of Nathan Patterson and Maxim de Kuyper on the wings, with Ahmed Hodzic, Anderson returning from a lost season to a torn ACL, and Ben Godfrey in the centre of defence. Lewis Ferguson pairs with Anton Stack in midfield, and Reece Nelson also returns, having lost his season to injury, alongside Assane Diao in support of Matheus Cunha up front. As for Brentford, they'll line up in their 5-3-2 formation. David Raya in goal, with Ruslev and Malacia the wing-backs. Aya, Good and Pinnock will be the 3 in the centre of defence. Paris Magoma, Christian Nørgaard and Jensen line up in the centre of midfield, whilst Asmoon is paired with what looks to be a youth academy prospect for Brentford in the young Hammond. So without further ado, let's head over to Goodison Park and see if we can get the season kicked off in the right way with 3 points here at home. So we are up in the booth here at Goodison Park, ready to kick off Season 3. I wasn't sure we would ever get here. The gameplay on FC 24 has been so terrible of late that I thought we might just have to put the series to bed, but a new update has brought more changes to the gameplay, and thankfully there have been positive changes on this particular occasion. I am, of course, playing with the new slider set as well. Standard version 5.0 is out. I uploaded a video on the channel yesterday. So we are, of course, playing with those new sliders as Brentford head clear, almost into the path of Matheus Cunha, though. And so with those two things, improvements to the gameplay and the new sliders, I'm actually buzzing to start a new season here with Everton. We do have unfinished business. We did manage to backdoor our way into Europe last season. So I want to give the Europa League as good a go as possible and potentially try and win it here in what will be the last season in the realistic takeover rebuild with Everton. We're going to go 3 seasons here in this particular series. We'll do as well as we can in this season. And then, regardless of how it finishes, we'll be moving on to something new. But we are going all out here. Plenty of new arrivals in the squad. Anton Stack in the centre of midfield being one of the more high-profile arrivals this summer. Gerard Deulofeu finds his place on the bench, though I'm sure he'll come out to rapturous applause when he inevitably makes his appearance here at some point today. Good challenge from Ben Godfrey. Stepping into the defence in place of Jarrad Branthwaite, because we've had some fairly high-profile departures as well. Well, I say fairly high-profile. They can't really get more high-profile than Amadou Onana and Jarrad Branthwaite. They've been the faces of this rebuild really up until this point. Both young, talented, dynamic players. The best and the brightest of what we've had to offer, really. But both have left. And we've got somewhere in the region of £80 million back for the two of them. As Reece Nelson comes away on this left-hand side. He is being tracked by Azmoun, but Nelson's just about got the pace to scurry away from him. And it's wide. It's actually Anton Stack. I thought it was Cunha the whole time. And it's actually Anton Stack, and he puts it wide. And it's just wide. If that was Cunha, potentially that would have been in the back of the net. Both have got very similar boots. So I thought I was just going to be able to pick out that top corner with Cunha. But Stack ends up bending it just wide. What a moment that would have been about 10 minutes into his debut. Oh, and that's a wayward pass from Joachim Andersen. Might take him a little while to settle in this season. He lost basically his entire season. He was injured, I believe, in his first Premier League game for us last year. Torres ACL was out for the year. Reece Nelson can't quite find Cunha, and Brentford are away. There's Ferguson back in a position to defend, though. And he's done a good job of it, forcing Azmoun to give the ball up. And Maxim de Kuyper trying to stop the cross initially, which he does. Brentford still in a position to put the ball in, though. It's more good defending by Maxim de Kuyper. Scott McTominay, of course, another addition to the side at centre midfield. And I'm sure we'll see him at some point today. Stack and Ferguson are certainly going to be our starters in that central midfield area. And Jordan Pickford comes to claim really well. Maxim de Kuyper on the left-hand side there. Kind of wanting the ball, but the Brentford corner taker was in the area still. So Stack and Ferguson will start in midfield, but James Garner, Scott McTominay at the very least, will certainly play their roles this year. Josh De Silva probably will take a bit of a lesser role than he did last year, but there's no reason he can't contribute as well. And this could be an Everton corner. No, it's going to be an Everton free kick. We'll take it.
I'm excited to use Reece Nelson again. I really missed him last year. And I think we could potentially add another winger. We did, of course, bring Bertrand Traore in. But he's not very good, to put it politely. And I kind of wish we were forced, or we weren't forced to play him quite as much last season. As Maxim de Kuyper delivers the free kick into a good area. Anton Stack there, but headed away by Brentford. The only reason Traore played so much was because we dealt with so many injuries. Reece Nelson, of course, was out the entire season, but Jack Harrison dealt with his injuries. And Assane Diao was also injured towards the end of the season, so we were forced to play. Anton Stack in a good position, strikes towards goal. And harmlessly wide again, but Anton Stack is finding himself in some good attacking positions early. We did, of course, have that obligation to buy with Villarreal. If Bertrand Traore played 20 games or more, then we were obligated to make the deal permanent. We didn't have any choice. So Bertrand Traore does arrive. We do, of course, still have Jack Harrison and Lewis Dobbin. So it's not that we have a lack of players in those wing positions. Oh, and that's left dreadfully short by Maxim de Kuyper. But we do, I think, have a lack of difference makers. Reece Nelson, I would say, is that. Assane Diao, I would say, is that. Lewis Dobbin, I would say, could be that at some point in the future. I wouldn't say he is that right now. So I really wouldn't mind adding one more difference maker to support Matheus Cunha up front. I think Anton Stack is going to have another strike from range, this time blocked by Brentford. I would love to bring in Mykhailo Mudryk on a loan-to-buy deal, something like that. So maybe we'll go and negotiate with Chelsea and see if they're willing to play ball. We did, of course, sell them Jared Branthwaite, so I think selling them Branthwaite on the condition that they loan us Mykhailo Mudryk for the season wouldn't be the worst idea. It's another loose pass, this time from Ben Godfrey. We've struggled playing out from the back so far, as Maxim de Kuyper is again tasked with stopping the cross, and again he manages to do exactly that. Jordan Pickford with the ball in his own 6-yard box just lofts it out towards Nathan Patterson. Not too much on ahead of him. And we want to try and establish a bit of control here in the game. It's not been a terrible opening half an hour to our Premier League campaign, but I wouldn't say we're exactly dictating the tempo of the game at this stage. So let's try and do that a little bit more in these last 15 minutes or so. Poor challenge by the Brentford man, but referee waves play on. Lewis Ferguson making a nice little run inside Assane Diao, but he can't quite find him. Good block by Lewis Ferguson though, and it is out for a Brentford throw. And Ferguson couldn't quite steal that away. And worked nicely on this left-hand side by Brentford. Ahmed Hodzic steps up to try and force them back and manages to do exactly that. And it's Malacia up from his left wing-back position, and Nathan Patterson can't quite stop the cross on the first attempt, and it's a really good save from Jordan Pickford. The best of the game so far, his first really of the game so far. Chances have been few and far between in the first half, but it's a really good reaction stop from Jordan Pickford from a dangerous situation. And Brentford look to continue to cause issues for us. Matheus Cunha could get us away on a quick break here though. Oh, and he can't quite cut it outside Paris Magoma, who does a really good job of halting that quick counter-attack in its tracks. Assane Diao though is going to look to pick up the mantle here. He does manage to cut inside, and the run of Cunha just takes the defender away, but what a sliding challenge that is. We get the fortunate bounce though, and Cunha just lays it into the path of Stack. Reece Nelson just about manages to keep it in. I think the pass was intended More for the Kuiper than it was for Reiss Nelson. And Anton Stack into the Brentford box. Lewis Ferguson, the ball falls to his feet. Reiss Nelson, I think it's a free kick. The referee's blown for some reason. I can't imagine why Brentford would have a free kick here, but apparently they have. I thought for a moment it might have been a penalty because Reiss Nelson had the ball at his feet and it was the Brentford player that put the challenge in. But there was no reaction from the crowd, so I thought it must be a Brentford free kick. And no idea what that was for, though. Again, nicely worked down this left-hand side from Brentford, and it's Paris Magoma who has been pretty influential for Brentford so far. Good intervention by Nathan Patterson, though, but a loose touch as he tries to come away with the ball, gives Brentford possession once more. And Christopher Ayer is in an extremely advanced position. And we do manage to force Brentford back. If we could steal the ball away, Brentford are going to be curiously short at the back with Ayer in such an advanced position. Good intervention, Maxim de Kuiper. And Reiss Nelson was away on that left-hand side, but the pass was one with a high level of difficulty. Patterson just not quick enough there. Malacia is right on top of him, and Patterson trying to find some space to break, but he needs to be far better in possession. Not sure whether to bring in another first-team right-back or not. Do we try and not replace Nathan Patterson, but upgrade Nathan Patterson? Or do we stick with Patterson as our starter and just bring in a backup for him? I'm really undecided about that. Reiss Nelson with a run in behind, trying to create the last opportunity of the first half, and Maxim de Kuiper can't find him. It's going to be 0-0 at half-time in the first game of this new Premier League season. A fairly cagey opening from both sides. Jordan Pickford coming up with the best stop in that first half by far. And we're going to have to look to get a little bit more creative and create a few more opportunities in the second if we are going to put 3 points on the board here in our opening game of the season. So back out for the second half. No changes for either side just yet in terms of personnel anyway. We are going to change our mindset somewhat. We're going to look to be more aggressive, more creative here in this second half. Going to look to pop the ball around a little bit more, as Matheus Cunha's in a good position. Same for Lewis Ferguson, but just laid off to Anton Stack. Ferguson in space to shoot, but couldn't quite get it into a shooting position, the ball. Anton Stack could win this, which he does. Lewis Ferguson can pull the trigger now, and it's a really good save by David Raya. Equal to the one of Jordan Pickford in the first half, I would say, especially since he managed to hold on to the ball. Lewis Ferguson once more. And Nathan Patterson is in plenty of space on this right-hand side. And if we could get players into the box, Nathan Patterson could well put a dangerous cross in, but we weren't quick enough to fill in. And the pass, unfortunately, is behind Matheus Cunha. Well worked from Anton Stack to get back and delay that counter-attack from Brentford, though. Ethan Pinnock now. Matheus Cunha pressing as well as Reiss Nelson, but Ruslev does wriggle away from him. And it's a big switch of play from Brentford to Malacia. Patterson can't win the ball back, neither can Lewis Ferguson, and Malacia's beaten Patterson. He's had the better of him today, really, Malacia. Assan Diao with all of that pace to burn is away on this right-hand side. Can he slip the ball through to Matheus Cunha? It's another fantastic challenge. Malacia has been incredible up and down that left-hand side for Brentford today. Excellent going forward, just as good, if not better, defensively. And he has put in a really good challenge there to stop Assan Diao in his tracks. Maxim de Kuiper steals the ball away. Anton Stack in the middle of the park looking for the ball, but instead we just work it across the back line. Eventually to Nathan Patterson, and Assan Diao once more. Does he want to take on Malacia? He's learnt his lesson, so instead he cuts inside. It's another good sliding challenge from Brentford, though. Matheus Cunha, though, does steal the ball away, and Aston Villa is in behind, and now he's only got Christopher Ajer for company. Plays it back to Matheus Cunha. Is Lewis Ferguson onside? It doesn't matter because it's another excellent last-ditch intervention from Brentford. Lewis Ferguson surely would have put the ball in the back of his net, and I think we would have seen the linesman's flag stay down on that particular occasion. I think there was a Brentford defender keeping him on, but it's a moot point. Really good challenge. Ahmed Hodzic. And Malacia is down. And again, Aston Villa can come away here on the right-hand side. Again, he's got Christopher Ajer for company. Again, he manages to cut inside. Matheus Cunha through the middle this time. And it's another fantastic challenge from Brentford. Those three centre-backs, and really across the back five, they've defended almost flawlessly today. And just as we think we're going to be able to create an opportunity, a Brentford foot comes out of the ether and steals the ball away. Good challenge. Lewis Ferguson. Aston Villa again. A bit more influential in this second half. Maxime de Kuyper on the left-hand side. Reece Nelson in space down the wing. And there's far too many Brentford defenders in the box to put a cross in. Reece Nelson finds Maxime de Kuyper, and the pass is just too far in front of Anton Stach. Trying to set up the centre midfielder for another strike from range, but couldn't quite lay it out in front of him. Ahmed Hodzic out of position, but Anderson there to defend. Anton Stach there as well. As is Maxime de Kuyper, again trying to stop the cross from Roerslev. Again managing to do that, but this time Brentford get the lucky bounce. And it's another good save from Jordan Pickford, and Anderson just hooks clear. First changes of the game coming up, I think, for Graham Potter and potentially for Brentford as well. It's going to be Hammond, the youngster, off, and Brian Burmo on. And we'll see what Graham Potter's got up his sleeve. So 2 changes for Graham Potter, and it's going to be 2 new arrivals to make their way onto the pitch. Lewis Ferguson and Matheus Cunha, the players to make way. And it's going to be Scott McTominay on in centre midfield, and Gerard Deulofeu, former Everton fan favourite, to take his place in that false 9 position. He was a player that was heavily suggested last summer when we initially made the transition from a traditional striker to a false 9. Couldn't get the deal over the line then. Matheus Cunha, of course, the man we went with in Deulofeu's place. But he does now arrive to back up Matheus Cunha. And if he can get a goal to put us ahead here, I think Goodison Park will go absolutely wild. Scott McTominay intercepts, and Aston Villa is away. Deulofeu through the middle. Aston Villa just with a heavy touch. McTominay collects though. Reece Nelson. Maxime de Kuyper just ahead of him. Cut off by Roerslev. And there's Stach. McTominay laid through into the path of Deulofeu, and it's straight at Raya. That was his opportunity to go down in Everton history. Even more so than he will already. Really good opportunity laid in front of him by Scott McTominay. And Scott McTominay again in a really good position. This time Deulofeu just backs off. Doesn't make the same run through the Brentford backline as he did last time. And he's struggling to find an outlet pass. Deulofeu ends up giving the ball back to Brentford. We had Maxime de Kuyper on the left-hand side, but it was going to be difficult to find him. And we didn't really have anybody looking to be the intermediary between the two. Good challenge, Anton Stach. Deulofeu just about manages to wriggle away from the Brentford midfield, and Reece Nelson can come away with it on the left-hand side. Ethan Pinnock facing him down. Reece Nelson cuts inside. Oh, it's a deflection, but we get the lucky bounce into the path of Aston Villa. Lofted into the box. Deulofeu, can he get the rebound? No, he can't. Anton Stach wins the header. Reece Nelson strikes from range, and again it's straight at David Raya. Deulofeu completely changing the game, but he just can't put the ball in the back of the net. And Reece Nelson ends up just smashing it straight against the Brentford midfielder. Two really good opportunities to take the lead there. Both of them squandered. Both of them straight at David Raya. And he's a really good goalkeeper. He doesn't need any help, but we are really helping him out by hitting these shots directly at him, straight down his throat. Good intervention initially from Ahmed Hodzic. Loses out to the Brentford man, but parried away by Jordan Pickford. Couple more changes for Brentford, just the one, Paris Magoma. I think we're going to see more changes from Graham Potter here as well, though, before we defend the corner. So 2 more changes for Everton and Graham Potter. Nathan Patterson to come off for James Justin. And Assane Diao to come off for Jack Harrison. We're losing a little bit of pace, or a lot of pace really, on that right-hand side. But fresh legs is what we get in exchange. Tomine trying to stop Malacia, who has been everywhere for Brentford today. He's been their player of the game by far, and potentially the player of the game. Brentford into the box. Maxime de Kuyper there to try and stop the cross, as he's been doing all day. Ben Godfrey's got a clear. How that wasn't headed away, I don't know. Took it down on his chest, but eventually the ball is lumped clear. Again, Maxime de Kuyper tasked with seeing Roerslev out, which again he does incredibly well. And Reece Nelson could again be away on this left-hand side. Gerard Deulofeu with a really good run in behind, and he's not quite strong enough to get there ahead of Ethan Pinnock. He has the pace over Pinnock for sure, but Pinnock just used his body really well, just boxed out Deulofeu there, so he couldn't use his pace. Brentford are going to continue their search for a winner here. Ben Godfrey steps up and is out of position. Tomine does well to slow the Brentford attack, though. And Brentford just going to play it across their back line. Not happy with the point here, Brentford. They are still committing their wing-backs forward late in the game. So still looking for a winner. I'd probably be happy with a point away from home in the opening game of the season against what you would have to say is superior opposition if I was them. But Thomas Frank still in search of that winner. 3 minutes left to play. Brentford going to make their last change. It's going to be Christian Norgard off and Aaron Hickey on, which is an interesting change. So Roerslev and Hickey on now. One of them must be playing centre midfield. Not sure which one really is more suited to play that role, though. Both, I would say, are just out-and-out wing-backs. And it is Roerslev who continues on the right for Brentford. Oh, and Brentford into the box, headed clear by Anderson. Out for a Brentford corner. And it looks as though they're going to take it short with Jensen, which they do. Reece Nelson over to meet Mbermo, and headed clear again by Anderson. Deulofeu with the ball at his feet. And he has just one Brentford man to beat, and he doesn't quite manage to beat him. I thought he had for a minute managed to slip by, but not quite. And with 1 minute of 2 added, having already elapsed, it looks like it's going to be a 0-0 draw at home to open the season against Brentford. Not the best result if it does end up this way. Good interception by Anderson, but that surely is going to be the full-time whistle, and it is. So it's a 0-0 draw in the opening game of the season. A game of few chances, but a game of good chances. We had opportunities to score in that second half, and we probably should have taken one. Deulofeu, I think, should have put the ball in the back of the net at the very least. But it's not a loss in the opening game of the season. We do put points on the board at our very first attempt. So positives to take from the game, certainly the performance and the fact that we do have points on the board already. We're certainly going to look to get more than a point from our next game, though, as we travel down to the Amex to take on a strong Brighton side. James Tarkowski and Noah Mbamba each come into the back line in place of Joachim Anderson and Ben Godfrey. James Garner replaces Lewis Ferguson in the centre of midfield, but otherwise the side is unchanged. And this too was a game of few chances. Brighton on the half-hour mark looked the closest to scoring in the early portion of the game, but the header from about 6 yards out was nodded just wide. Jordan Pickford would have been left with no chance. And with both teams huffing and puffing as we approached the half-time break, Anton Stach suddenly broke the game open, driving into the Brighton box, firing a shot across the face of the Brighton keeper and into the far corner of the net. So Anton Stach scores his first goal for Everton. And just after the break, we would double our lead. Reiss Nelson breaking down the left-hand side, cutting inside onto his right foot, inside Van Heck, the Brighton defender. And he was composed with the finish, again firing across the face of the Brighton keeper and into the back of the net to double the lead. Brighton did have a goal late in the game as João Pedro drove into the Everton box and pulled it across. It was poor defending, really. And we gave the ball away to Brighton to kick-start the move. So 2-1 was the score. But despite Brighton pressure, we did manage to hold on to our 1-goal lead. And we do put our first 3 points of the season on the board. Which does bring us to our third and final game of the episode. And our toughest test yet. Emi Martinez starts in goal for Aston Villa. Aaron Wan-Bissaka is part of a really strong back four. Leon Bailey and the youngster Louis Barry play on the wings for Aston Villa today. And it is that man Beto who finally starts up front to make his return against Everton. So Joachim Andersen is going to have his hands full in the centre of defence. Ahmed Hodzic and Ben Godfrey play outside him. Nathan Patterson and Maxim de Kuyper outside them. Lewis Ferguson returns to the midfield alongside Anton Stach, who has made a really big impact in the side already. And Gerard Deulofeu, after impressing off the bench in the last 2 games, gets his first start for Everton. And there were a few more chances in this one. Unfortunately, the first one fell to Louis Barry and Aston Villa, and he absolutely buried it in the far corner. It was some fairly complacent defending from Arnel Ahmed Hodzic that allowed Barry to get the shot away. And Aston Villa really had the better of the first half. Joachim Andersen did indeed have his hands full, but it was more the pace of En-Nesyri that was causing him problems than the strength of Beto as we anticipated. And it was En-Nesyri that doubled the lead just before the break. Joachim Andersen being beaten again by En-Nesyri's pace. Slid in the box to try and win the ball back, but got the player instead of the ball. En-Nesyri dispatched the penalty, and it was more lax defending from Ahmed Hodzic in the second half that allowed En-Nesyri to get another shot away, this time parried away by Jordan Pickford at the near post. Jordan Pickford would be called upon to make a number of saves throughout the game, most of them from En-Nesyri, this one being his best one though. He came off his line quickly to close the danger, and a smothering hand poured the ball away. Pickford likely was our man of the match for the quantity of the saves that he had to make, if not the quality. He did pull out several half-decent ones though. This one parrying away the ball to his left-hand side for an Aston Villa corner. And this one later when En-Nesyri again torched Joachim Andersen for pace, and he had to dive away to his left-hand side once more. En-Nesyri trying to pick out the far corner with his left foot. We did have a couple of really good chances late in the game to get back into it. Reiss Nelson went on a driving run but pulled his shot wide. And after a Gerard Deulofeu header parried away from close range from one cross, Josh Da Silva had an opportunity to get on the score sheet from the subsequent cross. It was a difficult technique on the volley on his left foot from the right hand side, and it was ultimately wide. So a disappointing result against a very good Aston Villa side. They did dominate the game. They deserved to win. They probably could have scored 1 or 2 more goals. So a win, a loss, and a draw in the opening episode of the season is not a bad tally. And it does leave us on transfer deadline day in 12th position in the Premier League. A win, a loss, and a draw leaves us on 4 points with a -1 goal difference. Handful of teams have won all 3 of their games already this season, Leicester City being one of them. And they find themselves top of the table, but Chelsea, Aston Villa, and Spurs all also on 9 points. So the fact we lost to Aston Villa today, not such a bad thing considering the start to the season that they've had. So the third and final season is off to a good start here at Everton. We are in the Europa League. The squad is shaping up nicely, and we have some points on the board in the Premier League. We do still have those 2 places in the squad left to fill though. So be sure to let me know in the comments who you think we should target in terms of a centre back and in terms of a right back. They can be first team players, they can be young players, they can just be depth. It's up to you, but make your recommendations in the comments below, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take it easy.